Hello, I'm Maria del Carmen, host of GyrlSense. Thank you again for supporting us and tuning in. Today, our special guest is Professor of Psychology and Director of Faculty Equity Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. Her recent research is on unconscious or implicit bias and different stereotype models. She works with girls and women interested in STEM education. She received the Hidden Bias Research Prize awarded by Level Playing Field, a private foundation. Please welcome Nilanjana Dasgupta.
Nilanjana.
Dasgupta. Dasgupta. There we go. Thank you for correcting me. But in the community, we know her as Buju. May I call you Buju?
Of course.
Thank you very much. Your research is on unconscious and implicit bias. It showed that implicit bias can be decreased and or increased given the right social context without individuals' awareness. Can you break down what unconscious and implicit bias mean in layman's terms? That way we can scaffold our conversation so that everyone can follow.
Yeah, sure. So implicit bias are the images that come to our mind when we think about a particular group or person. So for example, if you think about the ideal successful student, who comes to mind? The image of the kind of person who comes to mind, a young person who is of a certain race, is it a girl or a boy? Those are the kinds of images that might be implicit bias. Why is it bias? Because the image of who is successful in athletics, in academics, in science, in the humanities can end up being very much based on gender or race or other sort of group memberships like that. But in reality, who is successful may be a wide variety of different kinds of people.
Right.
It's that first image that pops into our mind that's sort of what we think of as implicit bias. It's implicit because we may not be conscious that we have a stereotype of who is successful, but we may still have that image in our mind, and it's only when that image is violated, when we meet someone successful who doesn't fit the mold, that's when we become aware of our bias. So implicit bias and unconscious bias are interchangeable.
Understood. So do you feel that is a conditioned, are we conditioned that way as a young based on whomever is raising us to, that becomes more natural, or is it just a natural thing that happens overall?
No, it's actually not, there's nothing natural about it in that sense, but it's learned, so it's conditioned by who we see represented as successful scientists or police officers or in any kind of field. It's conditioned by media images, it's conditioned by who we see in our own social network, so in our family or in our peer groups, who we see as our teachers. All of those exposures of people we see in different roles end up becoming our mental image of what it means to be a scientist or an engineer or an athlete or a school teacher or a nurse. But those images are restrictive. It almost excludes other people and makes it seem as if there's only one type of person who can be a certain thing.
So is the study based on the companies, the media, the humans behind who are highlighting or choosing to highlight this specific image that may seem, that we then take in as far as who can be a lot more successful? Is the study to change that behavior, or is the study more to let the community understand that just because of what we see doesn't mean that it's the right?
So there are lots of studies that my students and colleagues and I do. All of those studies are in one way or another trying to understand if you change the local context or the environment in which somebody is embedded. For example, if you change who they see in a classroom, if you change who their mentor is, if you change who their roommate is, if you change the media that they watch and see, does simple changes like that of real people or of media exposure change the images that pop into our mind unconsciously about groups? So can you change implicit assumptions or implicit biases by changing small things in our local immediate environment?
Okay. So what are specific social contexts without individual awareness where implicit biases can be decreased or increased?
Implicit bias changes when we see people who are different from the typical mold. So if you change the background wallpaper, who our teacher is, who a good student is, if we now start seeing black and brown kids as great students, if we, instead of great athletes or athletes only, that sort of exposure, seeing people who are different, who are good at things that we wouldn't expect someone to be good at, is what changes implicit bias. We don't have to tell someone, we can just show them. A successful scientist who is African American, a successful engineer who is Latina, a successful athlete who is Asian American. So if we turn it upside down by showing people the kinds of successful individuals who don't fit the stereotype, simply seeing that over time changes implicit bias.
It seems that we only see more of the highlights of your traditional individuals who we may put, or that we've been conditioned to see as the successful ones. The other side of that population, it may be just me, but it seems to be more in the media on a specific month, 1 month out of the year. So we highlight the successes and how great that specific population is. You know, they did this, they invented that, and so forth. But why is it only important at that month?
You've hit the nail on the head. That is exactly the problem. So the contributions of particular groups, as Women's History Month, Black History Month, but really the contributions of lots of different kinds of people of different types should be around us all the time.
Correct.
We should be reading and hearing about books written by lots of different kinds of people, or the successes and social contributions of lots of people. It's when we see that, when we are in environments that are engineered in some way to expose us to all of those kinds of people, that's when implicit bias changes. But it also changes when we just come into contact. People's attitudes change when we live in heterogeneous or diverse groups. Not diverse societies that are segregated, but diverse societies where people actually come in contact with each other. When you're friends with or roommates with or neighbors with people who are different from you. Those kinds of interactions, everyday interactions, not with somebody who is in some way unique or different, also changes our biases even without us being aware. And I think that's why I think diverse environments matter so much, that simply being in a mixed up place changes those mental associations in our mind. You don't have to teach it, it just happens naturally.
And I think personally, myself, I elected to go on a trip, and it was on a bucket list initially, but I could have gone yet again to the islands, but I chose Ireland because it's a culture I didn't know. and I wanted to learn about the culture, and we learn from each other.
Right.
So that's precisely
exactly right.
changing that social context. So I get giddy when someone asks, well, why did you choose Ireland? And I said, well, why not? Why not Ireland?
That's right.
So do I not fit the mold to travel to Ireland, or what's your perception as who should go to Ireland? So I completely understand. Thank you. It only validates my decision.
That's right. And I think your example of traveling is kind of the most potent way in which we can change the environment we plop ourselves into. That in a very short, intense time exposes us to lots of different people and exposes them to us.
Yes.
And by doing so, we all our images of who is American, who is Latina, who is Irish, all of that changes.
Absolutely.
So if people can, I think traveling is one of the best ways
Absolutely.
to change implicit bias about lots of different groups of people.
Yes, great. Thank you for that. Well, I have noticed the study of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, known as STEM education, in the uprise, not only in the university setting, but as well in high schools. You have been identified learning environments that promote girls and women confidence in successful programming within STEM education. What made it important to you to specifically work with girls and women with STEM education?
Several reasons. I think first, a lot of economic disparities between women and men come from the kind of fields or the kind of professions we are in. Women and men are equally talented at different kinds of things, but if you look at who pursues, who becomes a scientist or an engineer or a tech person, it's startlingly gender segregated and also race segregated. But that segregation doesn't reflect real ability and curiosity and talent. And those are the fields where there are more jobs now and more career opportunities in this century as our need for technology increases. And those are also some of the highest paying professions. So one reason why I'm interested in girls, women, and all kinds of other underrepresented groups, I want to see more diversity in STEM professions, is because one, I think there is a national need for it. Two, for very social justice oriented reasons, I think this is one way to achieve economic parity between women and men. And for both of those reasons, and because it's exciting, there are things to be discovered, there are problems, human problems to be solved, there are diseases that need research, there are new technologies we need to come up with, there are prosthetic limbs to be made. Why not have more women in those?
Why not? And as parents who we may not be confident ourselves in the science and technology and engineering and mathematics, so how do we convince our daughters that they can be successful in this field?
I think it really starts with early sort of exposure or immersion in things that are that kids are interested in. Kids are curious. So imagine taking our daughters to a science museum where they can play around and make things and move things and watch things change. We don't need to be scientists ourselves to take our kids and put them in environments where they can be awestruck. Everything from museums to nature walks to after-school activities to any kinds of summer classes or summer programs. a lot of which are free, and some of which are things that we would do anyway for our girls and kids, but we may not have thought to put them in a science program.
Sure.
Or in a programming thing where girls learn how to make circuits, jewelry out of circuits, or what are often called wearables. So they are electronics, but you make them into clothes and make them into accessories. So I think the more we put our daughters in environments where they see and they can make things, the more their interests will take off in different directions than maybe their mothers had or their dads had.
Sure. So taking them out of that box. So yes, take them to the American Girl store, but also introduce them to the museum and see what gravitates to them.
Yep.
Should we, though, if they resist, if they were told, oh, girls don't become scientists by a school peer, should we then back off? Should we then just let them try to discover it themselves and see where they go? Or should we still, put it in front of them so that it's an option for them?
I think we should always put things in front of them, and there may be different ways of doing it.
Yes.
Some of those ways are what parents do. Some of those ways are putting our daughters in touch in play groups with other girls their age who are interested in science or tech or something like that. So having peers who like STEM is often when kids become interested in it. So I have a niece who is 11 years old now, and last summer or something, I asked her if she would want to join an after summer program that taught kids this coding program for kids called Scratch.
Okay.
Scratch allows you to take characters and make a story using little sort of pieces, and those pieces teach kids how to write an algorithm. They're not really typing out the algorithm, but they're using little blocks to create a story. And once they learn, they can create more and more complex stories and make their characters move and do things and so on. And she loved it because she loves storytelling. So this is a kid who just loves characters and relationships and so on. And Scratch allowed her to create stories about people and about fictitious unicorns and other characters. And it tapped into something she already enjoyed, storytelling, but gave her a different way to tell the story. And through it, she is learning how to do programming in a way that is age appropriate, right? So that's a second way. And the third thing I would say is, I think figuring out what our daughters and nieces and other girls are interested in. There are many ways to introduce kids, girls and boys, to STEM. I think we need to connect it to something they already like.
Sure.
So for kids who like cooking, you can connect chemistry and why do certain things go together, and how do you put things together and you get an explosion, and or other things taste good. So cooking is a way to introduce chemistry. Kids who are active, who like nature walks and who like tadpoles and being out there in nature, they can learn about ecology and environmental science in that way. Kids who like to build things, houses, cars, other things, which may or may not, some girls may like it, other girls that's not their thing. Kids who are creative. The whole wearable electronics thing is a great way to introduce technology to girls. They may like the creative part of it, and the technology simply allows them a way to create jewelry or badges or crowns or something that is interesting to them. Yeah.
And what a way to exercise the brain. That is a wonderful way. I can see the push-ups going on, you know, in the brain, in the kid's brain, and just strengthening those cells in their brain. I want to speak about your recent award. So it's going to be a tongue twister, but you'll stay with me here. So recently, your groundbreaking research on implicit bias received the 2016 Application for Personality and Social Psychology Award. You have been recognized, as stated in the article, and get ready for it, for applying theoretical and or empirical psychological discoveries and advances to the understanding and improvement of important practical problems in education, health, law, politics, or consumer behavior, or worked with an organization, government agencies, or industry across your career. I mean, to me, this sounds like the Purple Heart Award of all personal achievements. So I congratulate you again on your success. Your success and other capacities have also been recognized, and I can rattle on lists of articles such as the New York Times, Boston Globe, London Times, National Public Radio, PBC NewsHour, BBC Radio, and so on and so on. We all admire those that can achieve their dreams. And sometimes it's even within our own household where the sibling is the great athlete, who's the academic achiever, and who's always recognized for that. Where the other individual may not find that passion in them or yet. What message do you have to our girls and women out there that are watching that can exercise their passion and be recognized for the successes that's important to them?
I think every one of us has talents and curiosities, and the first thing I think to do is to allow yourself to explore different kinds of things, different kinds of fields, classes, experiences that allow kids and adults to figure out what gets them excited. Okay. Ideally, we should be doing being in professions that are that arouse our passions, that make us feel we are making a difference. And for different of us, it'll be different things. Right. So I would say, don't worry about what your siblings do, or don't worry about societal restrictions of that say you can do this or you cannot do this. Find people who allow you or who encourage you to dream and dream big, and avoid others who restrict your passions. I think we should be the captain of our own ship, but I think outside of us there are oftentimes these expectations and restrictions and roles and fears that prevent us from straying too far. And I think the story of implicit bias is about those assumptions and restrictions, some that are from other people, some that are internalized within us. And I think the story of changing or reducing implicit bias is about finding the right people and the right environments that allow us to flourish, each of us.
That's wonderful. And just to close up our conversation today, when you circled back to your implicit bias, or our passion. So what may be my passion may be my passion. So is it only when you're successful that you guarantee the curiosity of others to then look at you, or how do you gather someone's interest in what you're doing? If I'm making myself clear. So if my passion, so your passion was implicit bias. This was your research that you were working on. That was something you believed in. I may not, it may go over my head, I may not have understood. Now you won this award. I want to know more about it.
Yeah.
So is it during the course of your research that you invite people to understand your passion? Or do we have to do the job and the work up front, be recognized, and then sort of prove yourself so that someone else can also support you in your passion?
Yeah, I know, I understand. I think the thing that I think is really important in the world of science, the sort of work I do, is to combine understanding human behavior, reducing inequalities, and then communicating that to the general public. And I see my role as doing all of those sort of in a cyclical way. So the first thing is I wonder why are few girls going in, such few girls and women going into STEM fields even though they get good grades. Then I say, how do I study that? How do I change it? But in designing the study and in trying to convince a class or an institution to allow me to do that study, I have to sort of pitch the idea to them. And in so doing, I sort of pull them into my research. And then when I get the results of my research, I'm really super invested in distributing that, in sharing that with other students, other girls and women, and I sort of talk about my research to different audiences. I talk about it to middle school and high school kids and their teachers and parents. I talk about it to students in university, women in STEM or others who might consider it. I talk about it to professors and university provosts and deans and so on. Then I go to tech companies like Google and talk about why it's important for them to hire more women and people of color.
So you go and you search for your stakeholders. To gain interest in what you're interested in, and then you're going to be successful anyway. And you've grown your research even greater and have greater arms to help you further that research, whatever the next best thing is out there for you to do. So I want to thank you so much for coming once again and joining the GyrlSense family. We hope to have you back perhaps a year from now or even sooner than that, and see whatever your next successful research is. Thank you so much.
I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Without your support, our program would not be possible. Once again, I'm Maria del Carmen. Please join us again for more GyrlSense.